Hey, how's it going YouTube, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I played the best Pixelmon server, Hex MC, and I won their first ever Pixelmon Tournament. But before we get into that, make sure you guys check out Hex MC. It is the best Pixelmon server there is, with fun custom forms that shake up the game, many classic features as well as many new features like daily rewards, and just other stuff that make the world of Pixelmon feel fresh. If you're interested in playing the server, the Discord link is in the description, as well as the IP. And hey, if you see me around on the server, make sure you say hi. I've actually been giving my subscribers some gifts on the server when they find me. If you also hope to ever battle me in a tournament, make sure you check out the tournaments that Hex MC hosts. I'm entering a ton of them, and they're doing them every other week, and I would love a chance to battle some of you. Alright, with all that out of the way, here's the story about how I won Hex MC's first Pixelmon Tournament. So within the first week of the server, at the end, they had announced a tournament. The format was AG, anything goes, with the following clause listed, like evasion clause, sleep clause, bag clause, just kind of like basic competitive Pokemon clauses. They also came out and said that there is a restriction of 2 legendary Pokemon per team. Paradoxes count as legendary. Now, I immediately went to brainstorming, but I didn't have enough time this week to really get a fully complete team. Actually, only one of my Pokemon was even IV'd, and I only brought 1 legendary Pokemon to this tournament. I didn't even use my second legendary slot because I didn't have enough time to get another. With all that said, I do want you guys to look at this team, and while I am pretty proud of it, just remember that it could have been a lot better, but, I mean, we only had a week to do this. It was AG, the server was new, and it was actually in a beta period, so a lot of stuff wasn't out, but now it is out, so teams are actually a lot easier to build, and the next tournament I enter, I will definitely have a more completed team, but nevertheless, I'm super excited to show you guys the team. First up, we have Riso the Zekrom. He is going to be our main Dynamax user. We are not using Mega Evolution. Yeah, that's another thing. This tournament, you could use Megas, Z-Moves, or Dynamax. I chose Dynamax because I believe it is the best mechanic out of all of them, and Riso will be our main abuser for Dynamax. I went ahead and used the same exact EV spread, nature, and moveset from the Season 3 tournament team, where I used Fusion Bolt, Dragon Claw, Dragon Dance, and Substitute with the item Leftovers, Jolly Nature, same EV spread here on screen with fully maxed out attack and speed. And as I go through the team members, you guys are going to see everything on team, including their ability and why I chose it. Obviously, Zekrom gets Terra Vault. This helps him counter any unaware users, and overall is like our main damage dealer of the team, and is easily our best Dynamax user. The second member of the team is another returning member like I mentioned earlier, and it is Miss Toothy the Skeletor, although this time she isn't shiny, but she is here in all her glory, back ready to enter another tournament alongside me. I'm going with the same moveset and EVs and nature as I did in the Season 3 video, but I am switching up the item. In Season 3, I used a Lumberry, and honestly, it did really well, but I personally think that it would have benefited the Miss Toothy more if I had used heavy duty boots in case there's hazard spam or anything like that. We're also running with the ability Unaware because I know that since it's an AG format, there's going to be a lot of Dragon Dancers, Swords Dancers, Pokemon like Zacian and Rayquaza that are going to want to try and set up and just go for sweeps, and Skeletor helps wall them off completely. Our next team member is Prickles the Ferrothorn, again, another returning member, and we have the same EV spread, nature, all that good stuff, but there is one change, and that is on the moveset. I didn't have enough time to breed Leech Seed and Knockoff on Ferrothorn, so I ended up just going for Power Whip for some stab damage, and I also thought in my head that maybe it could counter a Pokemon like Gastrodon or Quagsire if anyone had any similar ideas for countering Pokemon like Kyogre or having an unaware user like me. Power Whip just allows me to do some good damage with Ferrothorn. Our next team member is very unfinished. I would never recommend bringing this moveset or anything in the tournament, but it is our shiny Feraligatr Reptar that we got. If you played the beta, you got a shiny starter, and Reptar has Aqua Tail, Crunch, Ice Punch, and Thrash. This is an awful moveset. I didn't even have enough time to get a Liquidation or Waterfall TR for him, and I didn't have an extra ability patch to change his ability from Torrent to Sheer Force. The item I went with was Life Orb because we really need that extra damage, and yeah, I just needed a bulky water, and he was my main playthrough Pokemon of Hex MC, so I just fully EV'd him up in attack and speed, ignored the awful IVs, and we just settled with him. Our next team member is Mandy the Mandibuzz, which was the last edition I made. I literally needed a defog user, and so I flew around, and then I realized Mandibuzz spawns at level 100 in the Ultra Space, in the Ultra Desert, so I caught one, and that's what we're using. Also, side note, I know you guys see Attract on the moveset. Yeah, I wanted that to be Roost, but it's actually an egg move on Mandibuzz for whatever reason, so I just put on Attract in case I ever found a use for it. Spoiler alert, I didn't click that move a single time in this tournament, but we decided to run Attract, Knockoff, Defog, and Toxic. We just needed a defog user on this team. Although Miss Toothy has heavy duty boots, hazards could really hurt the rest of the team, so I wanted something that could get those out of the way. We also have the ability Overcoat to counter any like Spore, Stun Spore users, and just stuff of that nature. But yeah, I actually do like this Pokemon a lot, and I think it was really good. I wish I had Roost instead of Attract. And finally, our final team member is Cringe Gambit, the King Gambit. If you've watched my streams, you know I really hate this Pokemon. Design-wise, it's super awesome, but in terms of competitive, I just think the playstyle of King Gambit is cringe, hence the name Cringe Gambit, and I think it's just a super unfun, unfair Pokemon in most formats, but hey, it's AG, and I wanted to show why it's so broken. The moveset we're running is Swords Dance, Sucker Punch, Kowtow Cleave, and Iron Head. All good damages with Stab. Swords Dance lets us set up, and then Sucker Punch obviously has priority, and we can just pretty much end most teams with that. The ability is Supreme Overlord, and if you don't know how this ability works, basically for every Pokemon that faints on your team, King Gambit gets an attack boost, so if it's the last Pokemon remaining, it is absurdly strong. The item I chose was Leftovers. Normally I'd actually put Lumberry on King Gambit, but I think a lot of Pixelmon players are unfamiliar with this Pokemon because it did just get added into Pixelmon, so I just wanted to use Leftovers. Plus, in case anyone had the same idea, I wanted to make sure my King Gambit could pretty much always win King Gambit 1v1s. Alright, with all that said, that is the tournament team, and let's get right into the battles. My first match was against player Martin, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but anyway, they are my round 1 opponent, and they brought a team of Cyclozar, Genesect, Entei, Necrozma, Iron Thorns, and Dreadnought. Funny enough, I didn't realize that they actually had more than 2 legendary Pokemon until writing this script here. It's a good team, I was confident, but yeah, you're not allowed to have more than 2 legendary Pokemon. I think maybe like they didn't see that rule, and obviously no one noticed because the legendary Pokemon that they're using actually aren't even that great. But anyway, yeah, let's just get on to the battle. They lead Dreadnought as I lead Prickles. I use Leech Seed expecting the Shell Smash, but they use Jaw Lock. I then go for Power Whip next turn since I'm trapped in, and it picks up the KO immediately, somehow even outspeeding the Dreadnought. Genesect comes out next. I decide to go for Thunder Wave after barely surviving the Flame Charge. While the speed was raised, the Thunder Wave made it not really matter. I then swap into Skeledirge as it gets parried. I then go for Torch Song as I switch into Necrozma. It does good damage and I get the special attack boost, so I simply go for a second one after eating the Psycho Cut. I then go for Slack Off since it is Life Orbed and next turn it'll KO itself. They land a big Night Slash, but they fall the same turn and I get a free heal up. Entei comes out next, so I just go for Shadow Ball as they set up Sunny Day. I do about 64%. The next turn, they miss Sacred Fire, and I KO with Shadow Ball. Cyclozar comes out next and hits a critical hit Dragon Rush, but my Torch Song takes it down to 13%. They then U-turn out, but I had used Slack Off and got back to full HP. The Iron Thorns comes in and goes for Dragon Dance, but I simply KO with Shadow Ball. Cyclozar comes out next, but one more Torch Song and it's out. Lastly comes Genesect, but I KO it with one last Torch Song, and I win my round 1 battle of the tournament. This is probably a good note to have, but the battles are a best of 1 double elimination, so you have to lose 2 battles before you're eliminated from the tournament, and the only battle that is a best 2 out of 3 is the finals match. The second round I'm facing off against Kahoot God. His team consisted of Darmanitan, Chansey, Quaquaval, Magnezone, Dragapult, and a Zacian. Riso looks incredible here, but I need to get damage on Magnezone so Riso can finish him off. Plus, Zacian and Dragapult can be huge threats in a late game, but I was feeling on top of my game. I lead Reptar as he leads Magnezone, and I go for a hard-hitting Aqua Tail to break the air balloon and do over half its HP, but Reptar falls to Thunderbolt. I then send in Riso and set up a freeze substitute as he swaps into Zacian. I used Fusion Bolt. The Zacian used Play Rough and it broke the substitute, but Fusion Bolt does around 53%. I then swap into Mistoothy and his Play Rough misses. I then go for Will-O-Wisp as he swaps into Quaquaval and it's now burned. I then simply swap into Riso as the Aqua Step does laughable damage. I use Substitute as he uses another Aqua Step. The next turn I use Dragon Dance as he swaps into Dragapult. I then go for the Dragon Claw, but he swapped into Zacian, who's immune. I then go for the Dynamax and use Max Lightning, which takes out Zacian. Chansey comes in next and uses Protect to tank my second Dynamax turn, but my third Max Lightning gets the KO. Darmanitan comes out next, but I simply click Fusion Bolt and the Darmanitan falls. Quaquaval comes out next, but it meets the same fate. Dragapult is in and it gets KO'd by Dragon Claw. Magnezone comes in now and is able to tank a Fusion Bolt and get a good Flash Cannon in, but it only breaks the substitute, and one last Fusion Bolt, and I win the battle with a Zekrom sweep. I proceed to round 3 where I have to face off against Jed, who had a very fun and aggressive team. He had a Ditto, Melmetal, Cloyster, Whimsicott, Fluttermane, and a Dracovish. The main notes are his Fluttermane and Dracovish because they are terrifying to even just switch into, even if you can resist the hit. They just hit that hard. I lead Prickles as he leads Cloyster. I go for Thunder Wave, but I easily should have just gone for Leech Seed here and then pivot. I land the Thunder Wave as he uses Shell Smash, and then I go for Leech Seed, but Icicle Spear KOs. That's rough. So I send in Mistoothy. He misses a Rock Blast, and I get a huge Torch Song off. Next turn, I tank the Rock Blast and KO with another Torch Song. He sends in Dracovish, and I swap into Reptar. Vicious Rend is just too much damage, and it KOs Reptar the following turn thanks to the Choice Scarf. I then send in Mandy, and I simply go for Toxic, but he lands a big Vicious Rend, and I miss Toxic. Mandy falls the next turn. I decide to just send in Riso since he is locked into a water move, and I go for Dragon Claw. Vicious Rend does a little over half, but the Dragon Claw picks up the KO. Whimsicott comes in, so I simply send in Mistoothy, who eats the Moonblast. I go for Slack Off in the next turn as he uses Memento. Fluttermane then comes in and I decide to sacrifice Mistoothy to the oncoming Shadow Ball. I then send in Cringe Gambit and I go for Sucker Punch, but Jed had Dynamaxed, which meant Fluttermane survived on 11%. The Max Starfall hits hard, but Cringe Gambit holds. I use Sucker Punch again and get the KO. Melmetal comes out and I go for Sucker Punch, doing about 28% after Leftovers recovery, but Cringe Gambit falls to the oncoming Earthquake. I send in Riso and go for the Dynamax Max Lightning, but it doesn't KO, and Melmetal does so much damage with Earthquake. He uses Protect to stall a Dynamax turn for me, but the last Max Lightning gets the KO. The Ditto then comes out, transforms into Zekrom, and it KOs Riso. I have lost the battle. With this loss, it's not over, as I can still win if I can make it through the loser bracket, and I still believe I have a great shot at winning. My first match in losers was actually against one of the owners, Squid. He had an absurd team. Overquill, Melmetal, Quaquaval, Dragapult, Abomasnow, and finally, the Pokemon that created the AG tier itself, Mega Rayquaza. This was insanely terrifying, but since he was running Mega Rayquaza, he couldn't use Dynamax, so I had to use that to my advantage. Unfortunately, my space was running low for this recording, but I'm only missing the first 8 turns of the battle, which I can summarize here. Squid led Overquill, I led Reptar. Reptar does good damage while Overquill sets up Toxic Spikes, but eventually Reptar faints. Riso comes in and gets the Revenge KO. Melmetal then comes out, and Riso is able to do big damage, but the Earthquake is too much mixed in with the poison damage, and Riso faints. I then send in Mistoothy, who gets an easy KO on Melmetal, so I'm down Reptar and Riso, while Squid is down Overquill and Melmetal. My only legendary being gone already is scary, especially because Squid is preserving that Mega Rayquaza. Quaquaval comes in and I decide to stay in and use Will-O-Wisp. He hits an unfortunate critical hit Aqua Step, but I land the burn. This is a terrible position because the next Aqua Step KOs Mistoothy, even though it's burned. She would have lived if it wasn't for the previous crit. No matter, I see a way around this. I send in Mandy and begin just knockoff spamming for as much chip damage as possible, and I even use Defog to clear the hazards. After Quaquaval falls and Mandy is at low HP, he sends in Dragapult, who gets the Revenge KO on Mandy. I then send in Prickles. Prickles eats the Dragon Darts and uses Leech Seed. I then use Gyro Ball and do big damage after tanking another Dragon Darts. I go for Power Whip for the KO, but I miss. However, the Leech Seed finishes off Dragapult. Abomasnow comes in. I use Gyro Ball as Abomasnow lands a huge Focus Blast, taking Prickles down to low HP, but Gyro Ball had done about 52%. I go for another, hoping he misses the next Focus Blast, but he lands it and Prickles falls. I send in my last Pokemon, Cringe Gambit, but since he is my last, Supreme Overlord is at its peak. I simply go for a Sucker Punch and it KOs Abomasnow. Finally comes out the Rayquaza, and it all comes down to this. He Mega Evolves and uses Earthquake, but I had gone for the Dynamax and I clicked Max Steel Spike, my most powerful move. After tanking the Earthquake, I know I can't live another and I need to KO with this next move. Max Steel Spike lands and it KOs the Mega Rayquaza, and I have won the battle. After winning against the Pokemon that created the AG tier, I felt extremely confident. I feel great. My next matchup was actually against Aliapop, and they were using arguably the scariest legendary combo in the entire tournament. Zacian and Calyrex Shadow, two of the hardest hitting legendary Pokemon of all time. They also brought Glamora, Metagross, and two of Hex MC's custom Arcadian forms. Arcanine, which is a Fire Ice type, and Dragonite, which is a Dragon Ghost type. However, I came into this battle ready for anything. They start with Arcanine and I had led with Riso. I immediately swap into Reptar as they had used Agility. I go for Aqua Tail and survive a Sub-Zero Slammer Ice Z move, and then Aqua Tail picks up the KO. Glamora comes in and uses Stealth Rock as I use Aqua Tail. I bring Glamora down to Sash, but thanks to its ability, it also gets up a layer of Toxic Spikes. Glamora goes for Earth Power and picks up the KO on Reptar. I then send in Prickles. After tanking the Earth Power, I pick up the KO with Gyro Ball. Calyrex comes in next, and I decide to go for Gyro Ball to get good damage off and potentially break a Focus Sash. I'm not sure what item it has. I survive the oncoming Astral Barrage, and I do about 63% to Calyrex. I then sacrifice Prickles to the next Astral Barrage so I can safely send in Cringe Gambit. I use Sucker Punch and get the KO on Calyrex. Zacian comes in next, so I send in Miss Toothy. Alia had gone for Swords Dance, but I wasn't worried thanks to Unaware. I then go for Torch Song, but Alia had swapped into Arcadian Dragonite. I then make a play. I use Will-O-Wisp. I'm confident that I can live a Shadow Claw, but I also think Alia might double into Zacian, thinking I'll go into Mandibuzz. Plus, if for whatever reason Alia decides to go into Metagross, that can also get burned. No matter what play Alia makes, I come out on top as long as I land the Will-O-Wisp. Alia swaps back into Zacian, but I land the Will-O-Wisp. I'm free to then use Torch Song, which does big damage, and Behemoth Blade barely does anything to Miss Toothy. Arcadian Dragonite comes in, and I decide to Dynamax. The Dragonite lands an incredibly unfortunate crit with Shadow Claw, so even with me Dynamax, I barely survive. But the Max Phantasm gets the KO. Metagross finally comes in, and it Mega Evolves. The Mega Metagross had used Bullet Punch and gotten the KO. I send in Mandy and use Defog after surviving the Meteor Mash. I then use Knockoff for some chip after barely surviving the Meteor Mash, but Mandy then falls the next turn. I then send in Riso, who does big damage with Fusion Bolt, but falls to the oncoming Earthquake. I finally send in Cringe Gambit, and I decide to go for Kowtow Cleave because I know Alia's going to want to spam Bullet Punch because they're going to predict me using Sucker Punch. I land Kowtow Cleave, get the KO, and I win the battle. I have officially made it into the finals, where my opponent is none other than Jed, the same person who had sent me down to loser bracket in the first place, and we meet again for the finals. Whoever wins this, wins the entire tournament. Like I stated before, since it is the finals, the battle is a best 2 out of 3. And I'm nervous because I don't have the best track record of rematching people in tournaments. Seriously, every time someone's beat me once in a tournament and I climb my way back up in the tournament to battle them, I just seem to always choke. But this time, I came in determined. I wanted to be the first ever Hex MC champion. The battle starts with Reptar versus Fluttermane. I go for Aqua Tail hoping to live one attack, but Moonblast KOs Reptar. I then send in Prickles and go for Gyro Ball after eating the Moonblast. Cloyster comes in and I waste no time switching into Miss Toothy as he uses Shell Smash. I then use Will-O-Wisp as he had gone for another Shell Smash and I land it. He then goes for a third one, and I simply use Torch Song. He had actually forgotten I had Unaware. Rock Blast does laughable damage, and I simply spam Slack Off to keep Miss Toothy healed as Cloyster feints to the burn damage. Dracovish comes out next, so I send in Mandy. Vicious Wren just does simply way too much damage, and Mandy falls the very next turn. But I get a free switch into Riso and simply use Dragon Claw, but Jed had swapped into Whimsicott. I then send in Prickles, who eats the Moonblast. I use Gyro Ball as Jed sets up Tailwind. The Gyro Ball brought Whimsicott down to the Focus Sash, but it simply just uses Memento the next turn. Dracovish comes out and I use Leech Seed after surviving the Vicious Wren. I then go into Riso as he switches into Melmetal. I swap back into Prickles, but Earthquake does big damage. I then go for Leech Seed, but Prickles falls to the double Iron Bash. I send in Miss Toothy and go for Torch Song, but Jed lands an insane crit Earthquake. I go for Torch Song again and I pick up the KO. Dracovish comes out and I simply sacrifice Miss Toothy. I send in Riso and go for Dragon Claw after tanking the Vicious Wren. Ditto then comes in and it turns into Zekrom. It lands the Dragon Claw and KOs Riso. I then send in Cringe Gambit. We both use our Dynamax at the same time. He uses Max Lightning and it does good damage, but I do insane damage with Max Darkness. One more Max Darkness and I KO the Ditto, winning me the first battle of the set. The second battle starts with me leading Reptar again and Jed leading Melmetal. I go for Aqua Tail and do about 27%, but he gets the KO with Thunder Punch. I then send in Prickles. I go for Leech Seed and tank a double Iron Bash. I then go for Thunder Wave as he swaps into Whimsicott. He uses Tailwind the next turn, but I land a Gyro Ball, taking Whimsicott down to 1%. Next turn, it gets parried and I land a Power Whip to take it down. Cloyster comes in next and I land the Leech Seed as he uses Shell Smash. I swap to Miss Toothy, who eats the Icicle Spear. The next turn, I go for Torch Song as he swaps into Fluttermane. I do about 30%. I then swap into Mandy, who easily eats the Shadow Ball. I go for Toxic, but he sends in Melmetal. I then use Knockoff for chip damage and tank the double Iron Bash. I use Knockoff again for more chip damage, and then Melmetal KOs Mandy. I send in Miss Toothy, and she gets the KO with Torch Song. Fluttermane comes in, and I simply switch into Prickles, who tanks the Shadow Ball. Jed switches into Cloyster into the oncoming Gyro Ball, and I go for Leech Seed after surviving the Icicle Spear. I then send in Miss Toothy, and Icicle Spear does practically nothing. I survive an oncoming Rock Blast, and then I get the KO with Torch Song. Fluttermane is out next, and I sacrifice Miss Toothy to the Shadow Ball. I then send in Cringe Gambit and go for the Iron Head, but Jed had swapped into Dracovish. I do about 30%. I switch into Prickles, who gets taken down by Vicious Wren, but it allows me to get Riso in safely. I tank the Vicious Wren and get the KO with Dragon Claw. Fluttermane comes in and I let Riso fall to the Moonblast. I then send in Cringe Gambit and it all comes down to this: Supreme Overlord at its peak. I go for Sucker Punch and I get the KO on Fluttermane. Ditto is out next and it turns into its own King Gambit. I tank their Kowtow Cleave and do massive damage of my own. I then use my Dynamax and I go for Max Darkness. Ditto is at 7% and I easily eat the Kowtow Cleave. The False King then Dynamaxes, but Cringe Gambit, the King of Cringe, lands one final Max Darkness, and I have won the finals 2-0, which now means I am officially the first ever Hex MC champion. As we end this video, I do want to give a couple shoutouts. Shout out to Lucy for being in the call with me all tournament, keeping my head in the game, giving me ideas for plays, and just being a W coach, if you will. I also want to give a shout out to all the people I battled, and especially Jed for being an awesome finals match. It was a really fun battle, and I'm looking forward to more battles we may have in future tournaments. Lastly, I want to give a big thank you to the staff of Hex MC. Thank you guys so much. It was a great first tournament, and I'm super excited for the next one. Speaking of the next one, if you're watching this video when it comes out, today, June 1st, I will be streaming after their next tournament. The reason I don't stream during the tournaments is because I want to be fully focused, I don't want to be stream sniped, and I just want to enjoy the tournaments as they are. But I will always go live after the tournaments for maybe some interviews as well as other stuff. And I got cool announcements, so if you want to watch some Twitch stuff and see me stream on Hex MC as well as other content on there, make sure you guys follow my Twitch channel, link in the description down below. And of course, make sure you guys check out Hex MC, and I hope to see you all in some future Pixelmon tournaments. And yeah, if you guys want to see some more Pixelmon tournament content, I have a full playlist right here on screen. It's of all like the Pixelmon tournaments from my other series that I'm in, and I'm working on entering more tournaments, ones on Hex MC and perhaps some others outside of all of that. So stay tuned for all of that, and thank you guys so much for the support. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Help me get to 1,000 subscribers before 2025. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.